Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and those beyond the binary, it's a Tuesday in June, and there's a number associated with that, but we are not concerned with such petty things as dates. It's bedtime, everybody. Whoa. Hi. Welcome, everyone. Good to have you. As always, I am Colin, and it is, in fact, bedtime, brother. Tonight we're going to be continuing on with our journey, should I say our voyage, with the Dawn Treader. And we just kicked this book off yesterday. I've only realized today that it's quite a girthy novel as far as the Narnia series go. It's got at least about 40 pages or so on Prince Caspian. So something tells me this Voyage of the Dawn Treader is quite the epic, and we're going to be spending a fair bit of time on this lovely dragon-headed ship. How was your day, everyone? I hope it was lovely. The sun has been shining all day. We got outside and did a little bit of gardening, did some weeding around the radishes and the beans, and got eyes on some of the nasturtium blossoms that are coming up. Well, they're not blossoming yet, but they're sprouting very vigorously. So I'm hopeful to get some proper flowers up there in the garden box this year. It was nice, Cat Eyes Lucas says. You had a picnic? Oh, joy of joys. What a wondrous thing. Yeah, picnic season isn't not nearly as long as I would like it to be here in the frozen north, but by gum, we sure know how to make the most of it. I've been spending a lot of time outside. I went on my hashtag long walk the other night, which I am still recovering from. My blisters aren't too bad, but my back of all things is just so tender after that long hike through the forest. But yeah, it was a good day. I had a few phone calls, had a business meeting, nothing too intense. And for dinner we had some edamame beans and these delicious little local-made gyoza dumplings from some organization called Honest Dumpling, as opposed to all those phony dumplings you see strutting around trying to put on airs like they're real dumplings. But we know, we can tell. A real dumpling is not hard to spot, and by proxy, a fake dumpling is neither hard to spot. A little too windy, though, you say, hey? Well, I guess sometimes we have a little bit of hardship in our life, and sometimes it takes the form of wind, blowing hair into your face and snatching away the napkins and serviettes that you've laid out for your hot dogs. Tonight's beverage is good old run-of-the-mill tap water. But it's in one of my favorite cups. My dear friend Tynan gave these to me some time ago, and it's a set of pint glasses that are all themed after like old Atari games. So this one is Missile Command, as you can see there, and then the rest of the mug or the cup is sort of a gamescape, I guess you could call it, of what the screen might look like. This player's already up to 2,600 points. They're going for the high score. As for me, I'm just trying to stay hydrated. Because as far as I'm aware, there are only two options in this life. Hydrate or die. And I'm not quite ready for that second one yet, so drink up, everybody. In our journey that we began, our voyage that we began yesterday, we learned that Lucy and Edmund were staying with their aunt Alberta and their uncle Harold, as Peter was away studying for exams and Susan had gone with their parents to spend some time in America. Very exciting. But nevertheless, the two children were stuck spending much more time than they would like with their... what's the kid, Dursley? One of the Dursleys from Harry Potter? He's effectively a proto version of that awful child. He's a bit of a know-it-all, and he doesn't like mice or swimming. He's got a real penchant for grain elevators, but C.S. Lewis has made it abundantly clear that this child has no friends, and it's for very good reasons. So they weren't looking forward to their summer with this little boy, and as it turns out, they wouldn't have to spend it with their Uncle Harold and Aunt Alberta, because within the first 7 pages of the story, The Narnian magic began to take hold, and our threesome of adventurers were yanked straight into that painting, which seemed to grow and grow before their eyes until it consumed the world around them. The boat in the picture turned out to be a Narnian ship. The Dawn Treader, wouldn't you know? And Caspian and the gang saved them from the choppy waters of the sea, where we were reintroduced to Reepicheep, who is as proud and noble and quick with the blade as ever. Lucy, being the only girl on the ship, was given some of the king's clothing to wear, and when we last left, she had finished dressing and looked out of her window at the water rushing past and took a long, deep breath. She felt quite sure they were in for a lovely time. As am I. And so, everybody, thanks for tuning in. You only sometimes forget that I'm a huge nerd. What was it that clued you in there, Marin? Never mind, maybe don't answer that. It's a rhetorical question. Although nerd has been a badge of honor and a very viable social identity for quite some time now. I think ever since the first Halo came out, nerds have been on the up and up in the social world. Nevertheless, I invite you to relax and put your feet up and enjoy Chapter 2, On Board the Dawn Treader. "Ah, there you are, Lucy," said Caspian. "We were just waiting for you. This is my captain, the Lord Drinian." A dark-haired man went down on one knee and kissed her hand. Ooh, Drinian. The only others present were Reepicheep and Edmund. "Where is Eustace?" asked Lucy. "In bed," said Edmund, "and I don't think we can do anything for him. It only makes him worse if you try to be nice to him." That's some weird logic there, Edmund. "Meanwhile," said Caspian, "we want to talk." "By Jove, we do," said Edmund. "And first, about time. It's a year ago by our time since you left just before your coronation. How long has it been in Narnia?" "Exactly 3 years," said Caspian. "All going well?" asked Edmund. "You don't suppose I'd have left my kingdom and put to sea unless all was well," answered the king. "It couldn't be better. There's no trouble at all now between Telmarines, dwarves, talking beasts, fauns, and the rest. And we gave those troublesome giants on the frontier such a good beating last summer that they pay us tribute now. And I had an excellent person to leave as regent while I'm away. Trumpkin, the dwarf. You remember him?" "Dear Trumpkin," said Lucy. "Of course I do. You couldn't have made a better choice." Ooh, a new voice. Let's see here. "Loyal as a badger, ma'am, and valiant as a mouse," said Drinian. He had been going to say, "as a lion," but he had noticed Reepicheep's eyes fixed on him. Oh, Reepicheep. "Where are we heading for?" asked Edmund. "Well," said Caspian, "that's rather a long story. Perhaps you remember that when I was a child, my usurping Uncle Miraz got rid of 7 friends of my father's, who might have taken my part, by sending them off to explore the unknown eastern seas beyond the lone islands." "Yes," said Lucy, "and none of them ever came back." This is the portion of the book that can be equated to, one of the episodes at the beginning of the 5th season of a show. Previously in the Chronicles of Narnia. It's a smash cut of all your favorite characters and what they're up to now. "Right. Well, on my coronation day, with Aslan's approval, I swore an oath that, if once I established peace in Narnia, I would sail east myself for a year and a day to find my father's friends, or to learn of their deaths, and avenge them if I could. These were their names: the Lord Revilian, the Lord Byrne, the Lord Argos, the Lord Mavramorn, the Lord Octesian, the Lord Restamar, and... oh, that other one who's so hard to remember." "The Lord Roop, sire," said Drinian. Roop, of course," said Caspian. "That is my main intention. But Reepicheep here has an even higher hope." Everyone's eyes turned to the mouse. "As high as my spirit," it said, though perhaps as small as my stature. Why should we not come to the very eastern end of the world? And what might we find there? I expect to find Aslan's own country. It is always from the east, across the sea, that the great lion comes to us." "I say, that is an idea," said Edmund in an odd voice. "But do you think," said Lucy, "Aslan's country would be the sort of country, the sort you could ever sail to?" "I do not know, madam," said Reepicheep, "but there is this. When I was in my cradle, a woodwoman, a dryad, spoke this verse over me. Where sky and water meet, where the waves grow sweet, doubt not, Reepicheep, to find all you seek, there is the utter east. I do not know what it means, but the spell of it has been on me all my life." After a short silence, Lucy asked, "And where are we now, Caspian?" "The captain can tell you better than I," said Caspian. So Drinian got out his chart and spread it on the table. "That's our position," he said, laying his finger on it, "or was at noon today. We had a fair wind from Cair Paravel, and stood a little north for Galma, which we made on the next day. We were in port for a week, for the Duke of Galma made a great tournament for his majesty, and there he unhorsed many knights. And got a few nasty falls myself, Drinian. Some of the bruises are still there," put in Caspian. "And unhorsed many knights," repeated Drinian with a grin. I guess Drinian's a Caspian fan. Just made it. Welcome, Mulric. Good to have you. We're just becoming acquainted with the captain of the ship, Drinian, who sounds a lot like the footman from Warcraft 2. "We thought the Duke would have been pleased if the King's Majesty would have married his daughter, but nothing came of that." "Squints, and has freckles," said Caspian. "What? Caspian? Freckles? Those are a deal breaker for you?" "I guess kings get to be choosers." "Oh, poor girl," said Lucy. "And we sailed from Galma," continued Drinian, "and ran into a calm for the best part of 2 days, and had to row, and then had wind again, and did not make Terebinthia till the 4th day from Galma. And there their king sent out a warning not to land, for there was sickness in Terebinthia. But we doubled the cape and put in at a little creek far from the city and watered. Then we had to lie off for 3 days before we got a southeast wind, and stood out for 7 isles. The 3rd day out a pirate, Terebinthian by her rig, overhauled us. But when she saw us well armed, she stood off after some shooting of arrows on either part. And we ought to have given her chase and boarded her, and hanged every mother's son of them," said Reepicheep. Ooh, he's got that bloodlust. Reepicheep, I don't know, man. Chivalry and honor is one thing, but that sounds a bit severe. "And in 5 days more, we were in sight of Muil, which, as you know, is the westernmost of the 7 isles. Then we rowed through the straits and came about sundown into Redhaven on the Isle of Bren, where we were very lovingly feasted and had victuals and water at will. We left Redhaven 6 days ago, and have made marvelously good speed, so that I hope to see the Lone Islands the day after tomorrow. The sum is, we are now nearly 30 days at sea, and have sailed more than 400 leagues from Narnia." "And after the Lone Islands," said Lucy. "No one knows, your majesty," answered Drinian, "unless the Lone Islanders themselves can tell us." "They couldn't in our days," said Edmund. "Then," said Reepicheep, "it is after the Lone Islands that the adventure really begins." Caspian now suggested that they might like to be shown over the ship before supper, but Lucy's conscience smote her, and she said, "I think I really must go and see Eustace. Seasickness is horrid, you know. If I had my old cordial with me, I could cure him." "But you have," said Caspian. "I'd quite forgotten about it. As you left it behind, I thought it might be regarded as one of the royal treasures, and so I brought it. if you think it ought to be wasted on a thing like seasickness." "It'll only take a drop," said Lucy. "Oh, bless your heart, Luce." What a darling. Caspian opened one of the lockers beneath the bench and brought out the beautiful little diamond flask which Lucy remembered so well. "Take back your own, Queen," he said. They then left the cabin and went out into the sunshine. In the deck there were 2 large, long hatches, fore and aft of the mast, and both open, as they always were in fair weather, to let light and air into the belly of the ship. Caspian led them down a ladder into the after hatch. Here they found themselves in a place where benches for rowing ran side to side, and the light came in through the oar-holes and danced on the roof. Of course, Caspian's ship was not that horrible thing, a galley rowed by slaves. Oars were only used when wind failed, or for getting in and out of harbor, and everyone, except Reepicheep, whose legs were too short, had often taken a turn. At each side of the ship, the space under the benches was left clear for the rowers' feet. But all down the center there was a kind of pit which went down to the very keel, and this was filled with all kinds of things: sacks of flour, casks of water and beer, barrels of pork, jars of honey, skin bottles of wine, apples, nuts, cheeses, biscuits, turnips, sides of bacon. From the roof, that is, from the underside of the deck, hung hams and strings of onions, and also the men of the watch off duty in their hammocks. Caspian led them aft, stepping from bench to bench. At least, it was stepping for him, and something between a step and a jump for Lucy, and a real long jump for Reepicheep. In this way, they came to a partition with a door in it. Caspian opened the door and led them into a cabin which filled the stern underneath the deck cabins in the poop. It was, of course, not so nice. It was very low, and the sides sloped together as they went down so that there was hardly any floor. And though it had windows of thick glass, they were not made to open because they were under water. In fact, at this very moment, as the ship pitched, they were alternately golden with sunlight and dim green with the sea. "You and I must lodge here, Edmund," said Caspian. We'll leave your kinsman the bunk and sling hammocks for ourselves." "I beseech your majesty," said Drinian. No, shipmate," said Caspian. "We have argued all that out already. You and Rince was the mate, are sailing the ship, and will have cares and labors many a night when we are singing catches or telling stories. So you and he must have the port cabin above. King Edmund and I can lie very snug here below. But how is the stranger?" How indeed? Well, here's a little bit of a spoiler. He's still in bed. Here's a little picture of Caspian and the rest of the gang. Drinian must be the tall fellow in the chainmail, and Edmund and Lucy looking on. I can't spot Reepicheep in the picture, and I don't think he's left, but, well. Oh yes, there he is. He's tucked in behind Caspian, sort of next to Edmund. Oh, I was so focused before. Come on. Hey, there he is. You can just kind of see his little ears peeking out. What up, Reepicheep? Eustace, very green in the face, scowled and asked whether there was any sign of the storm getting less. But Caspian said, "What storm?" and Drinian burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha! Storm, young master!" he roared. "This is as fair weather as a man could ask for." God, there were a lot of W's in that weather, huh? "Who's that?" said Eustace irritably. "Send him away. His voice goes through my head." "I've brought you something that will make you feel better, Eustace," said Lucy. "Oh, go away and leave me alone," growled Eustace. But he took a drop from her flask, and though he said it was beastly stuff, the smell in the cabin when she opened it was delicious. It is certain that his face came the right color a few moments after he had swallowed it. And he must have felt better because, instead of wailing about the storm and his head, he began demanding to be put ashore, and said that at the first port he would lodge a disposition against them all with the British consul. But when Reepicheep asked what a disposition was and how you lodged it, Reepicheep thought it was some new way of arranging a single combat. Eustace could only reply, "Fancy not knowing that." In the end, they succeeded in convincing Eustace that they were already sailing as fast as they could toward the nearest land they knew, and that they had no more power of sending him back to Cambridge, which was where Uncle Harold lived, than of sending him to the moon. After that, he sulkily agreed to put on the fresh clothes which had been put out for him and come on deck. Caspian now showed them over the ship, though indeed they had seen most of it already. They went up on the forecastle and saw the lookout man standing on a little shelf inside the gilded dragon's neck and peering through its open mouth. Inside the forecastle was the galley or ship's kitchen, and quarters for such people as the boatswain, the carpenter, the cook, and the master archer. If you think it odd to have the galley in the bows, imagine the smoke from its chimney streaming back over the ship. That is because If you think it odd to have the galley in the bows and imagine the smoke from its chimney streaming back over the ship, that is because you are thinking of steamships, where there is always a headwind. On a sailing ship, the wind is coming from behind, and anything smelly is put as far forward as possible. I did not know that. They were taken up to the fighting top, and at first it was rather alarming to rock to and fro there and see the deck looking so small and far away beneath it. You realized that if you fell there was no particular reason why you should fall on board rather than in the sea. Then they were taken to the poop, where Rince was on duty with another man at the great tiller, and behind that the dragon's tail rose up, covered with gilding, and round inside it ran a little bench. The name of the ship was Dawn Treader. She was only a little bit of a thing compared with one of our ships, or even with the cogs, dromons, carracks, and galleons which Narnia had owned when Lucy and Edmund had reigned there under Peter as the High King, for nearly all navigation had died out in the reigns of Caspian's ancestors. When his uncle, Miraz the Usurper, had sent the Seven Lords to sea, they had had to buy a Galmian ship and man it with hired Galmian soldiers. But now Caspian had begun to teach the Narnians to be seafaring folk once more, and the Dawn Treader was the finest ship he had yet built. She was so small that, forward of the mast, there was hardly any deck room between the central hatch and the ship's boat on the one side, and the hen coop, Lucy fed the hens, on the other. Hens on a boat. Now I've heard of everything. I'm going to leave that up to your imagination there, Sam. The poop is, it's part of the deck, and it usually is the first to get swabbed, as far as I know, and probably for very good reason. But she was a beauty of her kind, a lady, as sailors say. Her lines perfect, her colors pure, and every spar and rope and pin lovingly made. Eustace, of course, would be pleased with nothing, and kept on boasting about liners and motorboats and aeroplanes and submarines, as if he knew anything about them, muttered Edmund. But the other two were delighted with the Dawn Treader, and when they'd returned aft to the cabin and supper, and saw the whole western sky lit up with an immense crimson sunset, and felt the quiver of the ship, and tasted the salt on their lips, and thought of unknown lands on the eastern rim of the world, Lucy felt that she was almost too happy to speak. What Eustace thought had best be told in his own words, for when they all got their clothes back, dried, next morning, he at once got out a little black notebook and a pencil and started to keep a diary. He always had this notebook with him and kept a record of his marks in it. Though he didn't care much about any subject for its own sake, he cared a great deal about marks, and would even go to people and say, "I got so much. What did you get?" Ooh, man, I remember those kids in school, and Yeah, they didn't have too many friends. But as he didn't seem likely to get many marks on the Dawn Treader, he now started a diary. This was his first entry. Oh boy. August 7th. Have now been 24 hours on this ghastly boat, if it isn't a dream. All the time a frightful storm has been raging. It's a good thing I'm not seasick. Huge waves keep coming in over the front, and I have seen the boat nearly go under any number of times. All the others pretend to take no notice of this, either from swank or because Harold says one of the most cowardly things ordinary people do is to shut their eyes to facts. Facts. It's madness to come out into the sea in a rotten little thing like this, not much bigger than a lifeboat, and, of course, absolutely primitive indoors. No proper saloon, no radio, no bathrooms, no deck chairs. I was dragged all over it yesterday evening, and it would make anyone sick to hear how Caspian showing off his funny little toy boat as if it was the Queen Mary. I tried to tell him what real ships are like, but he's too dense. E and L, of course, didn't back me up. I suppose a kid like L doesn't realize the danger, and E is buttering up C, as everyone does here. They call him a king. I said I was a Republican, but he had to ask me what that meant. He doesn't seem to know anything at all. Needless to say, I've been put in the worst cabin of the boat, a perfect dungeon, and Lucy has been given a whole room on deck to herself. Almost a nice room compared with the rest of this place. C says that it's because she's a girl. I tried to make him see what Alberta says, that all that sort of thing is really lowering girls, but he was too dense. Still, he might see that I shall be ill if I'm kept in that hole any longer. E says we mustn't grumble because C is sharing it with us himself to make room for L, as if that didn't make it more crowded and far worse. Nearly forgot to say that there is also a kind of mouse thing that gives everyone the most frightful cheek. The others can put up with it if they like, but I shall twist his tail pretty soon if he tries it on me. The food is frightful too. This kid, man. This kid. The trouble between Eustace and Reepicheep arrived even sooner than might have been expected. Ooh. Good. Good. Get him, Reepicheep. Before dinner next day, when the others were sitting round the table, waiting, being at sea gives one a magnificent appetite, Eustace came rushing in, wringing his hands and shouting out, "That little brute has half killed me. I insist on it being kept under control. I could bring an action against you, Caspian. I could order you to have it destroyed." At the same moment, Reepicheep appeared. His sword was drawn, and his whiskers looked very fierce, but he was polite as ever. "I ask all your pardons," he said, "and especially Her Majesty's. If I had known that he would take refuge here, I would have awaited a more reasonable time for his correction." "What on earth's up?" asked Edmund. Oh, dang. Love it when his 9-year-old says, "I'm a Republican." Oh my God, yeah. I've met that kid too, and let me tell you, he didn't have very many friends either. Yeah, this guy smacks of the Tories. What had really happened was this. Reepicheep, who had never felt that the ship was getting on fast enough, loved to sit on the bulwarks, far forward just beside the dragon's head, gazing out at the eastern horizon and singing softly in his little chirruping voice the song the Dryad had made for him. He never held on to anything, however the ship pitched, and kept his balance with perfect ease. That was close. I almost said what I didn't mean to say. However the ship pitched, and kept his balance with perfect ease. Perhaps his long tail, hanging down to the deck beside the bulwarks, made this easier. Everyone on board was familiar with this habit, and the sailors liked it, because when one was on lookout duty, it gave one someone to talk to. Why exactly Eustace had slipped and reeled and stumbled all the way to the forecastle, he had not yet got his sea legs, I never heard. Perhaps he hoped he would see land, or perhaps he wanted to hang about the galley and scrounge something. Anyway, as soon as he saw that long tail hanging down, and perhaps it was rather tempting, he thought it would be delightful to catch hold of it, swing Reepicheep round by it once or twice upside down, then run away and laugh. At first, the plan seemed to work beautifully. The mouse was not much heavier than a very large cat. Eustace had him off the rail in a trice, and very silly he looked, thought Eustace, with his little limbs all splayed out and his mouth open. But unfortunately for Reepicheep, who had fought for his life many a time, never lost his head, even for a moment, nor his skill. It is not very easy to draw one's sword when one is swinging round in the air by one's tail, but he did. And the next thing Eustace knew was 2 agonizing jabs in his hand, which made him let go of the tail. And the next thing after that was that the mouse had picked itself up again as if it were a ball bouncing off the deck, and there it was facing him, and a horrid, long, bright, sharp thing like a skewer was waving to and fro within an inch of his stomach. This doesn't count as below the belt for mice in Narnia, because they can hardly be expected to reach higher. "Stop it," spluttered Eustace. "Go away! Put that thing away! It's not safe! Stop it, I say! I'll tell Caspian! I'll have you muzzled and tied up!" "Why do you not draw your own sword, poltroon?" cheeped the mouse. "Draw and fight, or I'll beat you black and blue with the flat." "I haven't got one," said Eustace. "I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in fighting." "Do I understand," said Reepicheep, withdrawing his sword for a moment and speaking very sternly, "that you do not intend to give me satisfaction?" "I don't know what you mean," said Eustace, nursing his hand. "If you don't know how to take a joke, I shan't bother my head about you." "Then take that," said Reepicheep, "and that, to teach you manners, and the respect due to a knight, and a mouse, and a mouse's tail." And at each word he gave Eustace a blow with the side of his rapier, which was thin, fine, dwarf-tempered steel, and as supple and effective as a birch rod. That's a very well thought out description of of giving a child a thorough caning. Anyone else getting stream issues? I think I know why. One moment, everybody. Sorry about that, everybody. I don't know how much you caught of that, but I did some real quick troubleshooting, and I investigated my hardware, and it turns out that my battery was low because I didn't plug in my laptop today. I see you sipping tea. Okay, good, great. We're back. So, we just missed a little bit of excitation there. So we are, in fact, going to jump back a little bit. Yeah, here we go. We're going to jump back to page 33, and this is perfect because it'll give me a chance to show off this little picture here. It was talking about how Reepicheep likes to go and sit on the front of the boat. And can we do the fight, Mulric? Yeah, you bet. We're going to start just before that. Here's Reepicheep sitting up on the neck of the dragon, chilling with the lookout, singing his little song. Focus. Focus. And here is a little precursor of what's to come. Doing a little bit of hammer toss with the world's most dangerous stuffed animal. Oh, Eustace. Something tells me that this won't be the first thrashing you get in the land of Narnia. Oh, to be a mouse with a sword lounging in front of a beautiful ship. Yeah, that's the dream, hey? You know, we all eventually hope that we can, you know, build up a big enough nest egg that we can go full anamorph and turn into a mouse. Sigh. Stick him, Reepicheep. Yeah, he's going to get it. He's going to get it. I'm sure you guys missed a little bit of that lovely story. So we're going to jump back now. What really happened was this. Reepicheep, who had never felt that the ship was getting on fast enough, loved to sit on the bulwarks far forward just beside the dragon's head, gazing out at the eastern horizon and singing softly in his little chirruping voice the song the Dryad had made for him. He never held on to anything, however the ship pitched, and kept his balance with perfect ease. Perhaps his long tail, hanging down to the deck inside the bulwarks, made this easier. Everyone on board was familiar with this habit, and the sailors liked it, because when one was on the lookout duty, it gave someone somebody to talk to. Why exactly Eustace had slipped and reeled and stumbled all the way forward to the forecastle, he had not yet got his sea legs. I never heard. Perhaps he hoped he would see land, or perhaps he wanted to hang about the galley and scrounge something. Anyway, as soon as he saw that long tail hanging down, and perhaps it was rather tempting, he thought it would be delightful to catch hold of it, swing Reepicheep round by it once or twice upside down, then run away and laugh. At first, the plan seemed to work beautifully. The mouse was not much heavier than a large cat. Eustace had him off the rail in a trice, and very silly he looked, thought Eustace, with his little limbs all splayed out and his mouth open. But unfortunately Reepicheep, who had fought for his life many a time, never lost his head even for a moment, nor his skill. It is not very easy to draw one's sword when one is swinging round in the air by one's tail, but he did. And the next thing Eustace knew was 2 agonizing jabs in his hand, which made him let go of the tail. And the next thing after that was that the mouse had picked itself up again as if it were a ball bouncing off the deck. And there it was facing him, and a horrid, long, bright, sharp thing like a skewer was waving to and fro within an inch of his stomach. This doesn't count as below the belt for mice in Narnia, because they can hardly be expected to reach higher. "Stop it!" spluttered Eustace. "Go away! Put that thing away! It's not safe! Stop it, I say! I'll tell Caspian! I'll have you muzzled and tied up!" "Why do you not draw your own sword, poltroon?" cheeped the mouse. "Draw and fight, or I'll beat you black and blue with the flat." "I haven't got one," said Eustace. "I'm a pacifist. I don't believe in fighting." "Do I understand," said Reepicheep, withdrawing his sword for a moment and speaking very sternly, "that you do not intend to give me satisfaction?" "I don't know what you mean," said Eustace, nursing his hand. "If you don't know how to take a joke, I shan't bother my head about you." "Then take that," said Reepicheep, "and that, to teach you manners, and the respect due to a knight, and a mouse, and a mouse's tail." And at each word he gave Eustace a blow with the side of his rapier, which was thin, fine, dwarf-tempered steel, and as supple and effective as a birch rod. This is one of Clive Staples Lewis's another glowing reviews of corporal punishment. Although in this case, I gotta say, this punk was asking for it. No qualms about giving this one the stick. That sounded really mean. Sorry, Eustace. Eustace, of course, was at a school where they didn't have corporal punishment, so the sensation was quite new to him. That was why, in spite of having no sea legs, it took him less than a minute to get off that forecastle and cover the whole length of the deck and burst in at the cabin door, still hotly pursued by Reepicheep. Indeed, it seemed to Eustace that the rapier as well as the pursuit was hot. It might have been red hot by the feel. There was not much difficulty in settling the matter once Eustace realized that everyone took the idea of a duel seriously, and heard Caspian offering to lend him a sword, and Drinian and Edmund discussing whether he ought to be handicapped in some way to make up for his being so much bigger than Reepicheep. He apologized sulkily, and went off with Lucy to have his hand bathed and bandaged, and then went to his bunk. He was careful to lie on his side. Whew. A nasty thrashing. Jeez, Colin, don't make me mod you. Yeah, sorry. Those views are far from 2020 PC. Don't beat kids, everybody. That's the PSA for today. Don't hit children. I'll drink to that. And that's the end of our chapter for today. Maybe we should settle more things with duels. I would love that. If that was the like prototype for call out culture, right? If somebody does something egregious or rude or nasty or whatever, you just say, "Hey, you suck. Let's deal with it here and now." And then they did. There was that sort of a, I don't know, maybe it was just a silly fascination or obsession with honor and all of that, but nevertheless, I'm sure it resolved many disputes very effectively, for better or for worse. But yes, indeed, friends and family, that is the end of our story for tonight. So, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader begins with some action already, and they don't even have a proper nemesis yet. I wonder if there's going to be one villain in particular, or if it's going to be more of a series of adventures. I'm starting to get a kind of a like Jason and the Argonauts vibe, you know? I'm expecting a sort of tour to many different islands and strange and wonderful places. I'm sure not all of which will be perfectly safe. So, more action and excitement to come tomorrow evening at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, right here on Brother Bedtime. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the story so far, and I hope that you have a wonderful evening wherein nobody tries to whip you with a dwarven-made rapier. Yeah, that seems like a nice way to end it off. Have a great sleep, everybody. Good night, moon, and good night, stars. Good night, trucks, and good night, cars. Good night, shoes, and good night, cats. Good night, dogs, and good night, hats. Good night to friends and family. Good night to you, and good night to me. Sweet dreams, everybody.